Okay, so we got a really rare one today for Random Bits. This is the Microkit 816. This is an Intel 8080 based computer from about mid-1975. It is crazy rare. This is the only one I've ever seen actually in person. I can't even find anybody online that has one now. I can find lots of anecdotal evidence online that people had them at some point in the past, but I cannot find anybody that actually has one. More importantly, has something that I desperately need in order to be able to use this thing. Well, we'll get to that in a second. This thing is kind of special, not just because of what it is, but because of when it is. This machine was coming out again in the middle of 1975. This is right as the microcomputer revolution is sort of crawling out of the primordial ooze and starting to take forms that we would recognize today. And again, you have to consider that 2 years earlier, there were no microcomputers. So we're advancing pretty quickly here. The earliest machines were basically, kind of experimenter unit like the Mark 8 or the Selby. This machine was targeted at developers. So basically they were offering a machine that you could use to develop software for other computers. So it's not a home computer. This thing was crazy expensive. It started at about $3,500 US, and this is in 1975. So bear in mind with inflation, that's probably close to, 8 or 10 grand. And it went all the way up to, I think, around $5,500 if you loaded it up with memory. So yeah, this was not a home computer. I mean, it could serve as one if you were rich, but basically this was intended for professional programmers to develop software for the emerging microcomputer market. And it actually came in two different varieties. This one has an Intel 8080 CPU board, but you could also get a conversion kit, which is basically just a different CPU board, and that could have a Motorola 6800 on it. So you could just swap out the CPU boards and basically carry on with your day. Very, very similar in concept to the Digital Group and other companies that had the same sort of idea. Basically, you weren't locked into a particular processor. And those are the only two that I know of. I don't think they ever offered any other processors for it. In terms of numbers, I have no idea how many of these were ever produced. This machine is serial number 16. So that should give you a pretty good idea of how uncommon they are. And this one is obviously extremely early in production. I've looked at the literature that's available out there. There's not much, but there are catalogs and magazine articles going well into 1977 that were offering this machine. So I figure there probably had to be at least 1,000 of them made, but like I said, I literally cannot find any contemporary owners of this machine today. So I'm guessing there probably weren't very many to start with, and attrition means there's probably next to none left. So I'm really glad to have this one. Now, the reason I'm showing this machine as part of a Random Bits video rather than an 8-Bit Bytes is because unfortunately I don't have the thing that I need to make it run, which is its software. This machine basically doesn't have an onboard system monitor. A system monitor is not to be confused with a literal screen monitor. It's sort of like a combination BIOS operating system type thing where you can power up the computer and it has just enough smarts to do some basic tasks like look at memory contents, edit memory contents, load and save stuff to memory. That sort of thing. The Southwest Technical Products 6800, which is a contemporary of this machine, could do that. It had a monitor called MicBug initially, which was produced by Motorola, and then later on Southwest produced their own called SWATbug. But this machine does not do that. It has a single Intel 1702 Eprom that it uses, which gives it just a very basic bootstrap loader, and it expects to find a tape with the actual monitor software and debugging software called Quick Run. So basically you would turn this machine on and then I think you would hit load and then basically press play on your tape, and then that would be it. It would load up and you'd be ready to do whatever you had to do. The Intel 1702 Eprom was pretty much the very first Eprom ever made, and it has a few eccentricities to it that make it unique and special, and not in always a good way from more modern Eproms. But the main limitation with it was you only had 256 bits of storage. So that's basically why this machine doesn't have any capability other than trying to boot from a tape, because 256 bits does not give you a lot of room to add capability to the machine on power up. Now again, this was still luxurious compared to, say, an Altair 8800. That machine, when you powered it up, it was basically like a newborn baby every time. It didn't have a bootstrap loader, it didn't have anything. You basically had to program everything off the front panel before the computer could even be ready to actually load something. So from that perspective, this was convenient, and just like the digital group system, which also used a 1702 Eprom for its basic input-output, basically it just had enough smarts to be ready to load a tape which contained all the software, and then you could go from there. In another video I did of the digital group system, you can see this in play. Basically, you turn the digital group system on, it says initialize, blah, 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 cassette, and then you just plug in the cassette and then the operating system loads. And it's a pretty convenient system, way more convenient than the Altair and some of the earlier computers offered. But yeah, unfortunately in my case, it's a drawback here because without that software, there's literally no way that I can do anything with this computer. When you power it up, the first thing it wants is that tape. You can't break out of that and edit memory contents. You can't do anything without Quick Run. So that's a problem. And I have been searching diligently all over the internet for Quick Run anywhere. It's just not there. It's not archived anywhere. Nobody seems to have it. So this video is in part a plea to anybody that might have had contemporaneous experience with one of these, anybody that's got one up in an attic gathering dust somewhere, anyone that might have tapes left over from when they did have one years ago. If you've got a copy of that software, I would love to get in touch with you and get a copy of it. I'll happily pay for it because I just want to see this thing actually operate. All right, so now we'll do a little 10-cent tour here, or I guess adjusted for inflation it'd be more like $1.10, but anyway. What we have here is the keyboard, and I absolutely love these small metal encased keyboards. There's just something very 70s about them. You can see the typewritten label on the side here that I think probably was from the manufacturer. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe it could have been from whichever institution or business or whatever owned this, but it's neat to see. And then on the back here we have the actual Microkit serial number label, and you can see just like the tag on the side, it is serial number 14. 14. That is a low serial number. The keyboard itself is a Keytronics unit, but it's not the foam and foil ones that we all love to hate. It's I don't know the exact type of key switch, but it's not foam and foil. I've tested the contacts on these, they work perfectly. So if I ever do get this thing working, that's one thing that I don't have to worry about. That's always the thing that annoys me with the foam and foil Keytronics keyboards, is having to replace all the foam pads every single time I get one. Keyboard has a couple lights on it. Obviously run indicates when the machine is running. Enabled, I think, basically tells you when the machine is ready to actually start loading stuff in, because I don't think the bootstrap loader on this really indicates when it's ready to receive a tape. It's not like my digital group machine where it pops up an actual welcome message and lets you know that it's time to basically play the tape to the computer. We've also got a convenient little reset button there and a load button. And then the keyboard cable ends at a DB25 connector. And one interesting thing about this is they've actually attached the video cable to the same connector. So this actually passes video as well as the keyboard signals. And it ends in a 3.5mm jack, just like this one, which is a bit unusual. Usually you see the RCA or BNC connectors or something of that nature. This is kind of unusual, but I have seen this on older machines. It seems to be prevalent on machines that are older than 1977, 1976, 75, somewhere in there. So yeah, I don't have a monitor that actually uses this, so I use composite output on the back. And then we have the system unit chassis itself, which basically is more or less the same dimensions as an Altair 8800, at least from what I can tell. I don't actually have an Altair 8800, but I know the measurements of the cabinet, and it's pretty darn close to this one. However, unlike the Altair, there are no blinky lights, there are no switches. So this machine is quite luxurious for 1975 because you don't need any of that. You've got the bootstrap loader on an Eprom inside. All you have to do is turn the computer on and basically it's ready to go. And then along the side here, You can see once again, we've got another one of these labels. This system unit is serial number 16. Now the keyboard is 14. I don't know if the serial numbers would have lined up originally, or if this keyboard and this system unit just sort of got mixed up with maybe other machines that the original owner might have had. But yeah, serial number is 16. I mean, it doesn't get much lower than that. The only computer in my collection that I know for sure rivals this for serial number is my serial number 7 Atari Falcon. And then as we go around the back, you can see we've got a pretty impressive array of ports and things. We've got our power cord over here, we've got a fuse, we have an RF modulator plug in here, but you can also use it for composite out. You've got AC plugs. That was a very popular thing with computers in the 70s, was to have extra plugs on the back for various devices like your television set, tape deck, and so on. This machine was designed with the intent of using 2 tape decks concurrently, so that's why they've got 2 there. You've got an 8-bit I/O port, which you can use for any number of add-ons, and then you've got some auxiliary ports. Not really sure what those are used for, but again, probably if you were developing some sort of system based around the 8080 or 6800, maybe there was a custom piece of hardware that you were working with, maybe developing drivers for or something like that. So you'd have a way to plug it in there. And then you have EIA 1 and 2, which are basically your serial ports. And then you've got your keyboard. And then down here you have your tape 1 and tape 2 plugins. A lot of tape interfaces back in the day used this round DIN connector type thing, and that typically passed your microphone and earput input and outputs, as well as the ability to remotely control the tape deck. And then you have this huge honking fan in the center, which is actually pretty quiet for what it is. So the lid here is basically held in place by a few screws along the back and then a couple on top. I've already removed those just to make things easier, and basically just slide it off like this. And a note about the design of it is everything sort of fits into grooves. So it seems like this machine was kind of designed to keep the dust out. And you can see as I lift the boards out, there's not very much dust on anything in here. I mean, this thing is clean. Now, maybe that's because it sat idle for the better part of 40 years, who knows. But usually, even computers that have been sitting around, I usually find a fair amount of dust and grime and stuff in them. And this one is just pretty close to spotless considering. So you can see over here we've got our huge DC power supply, which is necessary because this thing can hold up to 10 cards. The majority of the cards in this machine right now are the memory cards. There is a tape input and output card, there's a CPU card, and then of course there's a video card as well. But yeah, it's a really nice, clean, well-built design. They were definitely charging a pretty penny for this, but you can kind of see why. Everything in here is high quality, well organized, very, very nice, clean design. I can tell you, having looked at a lot of computers from the earliest parts of the microcomputing age, this is absolutely beautiful compared to some of those. Now, of course, you were paying pretty heavily for that. Again, the base system price was $3,400 US. So yeah, you kind of would expect this for that kind of money. And this machine came with literally everything. It came with the chassis, it came with the CPU, the tape interface, and the video card. It came with one 8KB RAM card, and it came with the keyboard, and it came with 2 cassette decks. So you were getting a fair bit of value for your money there, but you're still spending a lot of money. And obviously, as this machine is outfitted, I mean, each of these add-on RAM boards is $800. Well, that's 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's $3,200 worth of RAM right there. So yeah, this machine could easily get up into, you know, about $7,000 in 1975 dollars, which would be way over 10 grand today. So yeah, definitely not cheap, but you are getting what you pay for. This is a very nice, high quality system. So as you can see in our chassis here, this thing is absolutely full. There's only 2 slots left available. I'm not sure if you could actually fill those with more memory or not. According to a product launch document I found from October 1975, these machines sold as a base system with 8 kilobytes of RAM for around $3,500. So that's one of these boards. And this machine has 5 of them. And again, they were selling those boards for $800 each. So this was not a cheap computer at all, assuming that these boards were all purchased at the same time as the computer. I'm kind of thinking this one may not have been, simply because it has solder mask on it, which the other ones don't. And as I'm looking at some of the chips on it, the date codes seem to be mostly around 1976. So I'm guessing this system was upgraded a little bit later on, but these boards look absolutely stock. They have no solder mask on them, they're just tinned. And you can see the date codes on most of the ICs are from 75. So yeah, there's a lot of money invested in this machine. I don't know what they were using it for. This is the video board. That's the character generator right there. It's also elegant and well put together, I gotta say. Everything just fits like a glove. This is the CPU board. Check out that white ceramic 8080 there. And I believe this ran at about 2 megahertz, so that's just beautiful. This is definitely one of the neater PCB designs that I've seen, and a sure sign that this thing was designed by hand rather than with the assistance of any kind of computer. See how curved those traces are? That's typically done with 4X tape on a light table. So somebody really skillfully put this together. And everything in this system is just so neat and well laid out. You know, I've seen some really messy circuit board patterns from this period of the 70s, largely because people were still learning how to build microcomputers, and it was all pretty much done by hand. And then the final board here, I'm not going to lift it all the way up because unfortunately the backing on this connector is broken off, and I'm afraid to rip that off of its pins. But this is basically the tape interface. I think it also handles the serial communications if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, altogether a pretty nice, well-designed, well-executed machine. And again, when you consider the time period, you know, 2 years before this machine came out, there were no microcomputers whatsoever. So everything that they were doing here were things that they were kind of just learning as they went. And these guys really put a lot of thought into their design and made it really beautiful, really easy to work with. You would never be able to work with an Altair this easily. But again, you were paying a lot more for this. The Altair, I think, as a kit could be had for as little as under $1,000, whereas this is, you know, well, with these memory boards, you're probably into $6,000 plus in 1975. So thousands and thousands of dollars. So you would expect this level of quality, I think. And then I'll just give you a little glimpse of the back plane there. I don't know if these slots are all wired exactly the same way, so I've been reluctant to move these cards over here. I think they probably are. I think this back plane is basically designed in a way that you can put the card into any slot you want to. I just haven't dared to chance it yet. All right, so I got it all set up here just for a quick test firing. Can't really do much more than that, unfortunately, without the tape software. Like I said, the Eprom on this machine is a 1702. It has just enough room, basically, to have a bootstrap loader that will look for a tape that you can load. And unfortunately, we don't have that. So I won't be able to show you the thing actually operating. However, in this photograph, you can actually see sort of what it looks like. And it actually looks a lot like basically a modern PC hex editor, from what you can see there. And that's basically how it works. You can pump things in with machine language, or they sold an assembler that you could use as well. They also sold a word processor, so if you wanted to just use this thing as a extremely expensive word processor, you could do that. So we'll just power it up here. So basically this is what it does right now. It comes up to a screen full of question marks. And if I hit reset, it does that. Now, I don't know if there's some other thing that we're waiting for, you know, if there is actually a prompt like my digital grip system that would tell you, you know, hey, put in the tape. I can't say for sure what's really supposed to be happening here. It's interesting that it changes when you hit reset. So I'm thinking it's possible, you know, being from 1975, user-friendliness was not always top of mind, especially not for a machine intended for developers. So it's possible that this is just what it does, and when you play the tape, it eventually comes up. But yeah, as you can see, it's basically working. The fan's nice and quiet. It comes up right away. It's got a nice crisp screen. There's no warpage going on or problems with the video quality, which is something I see all the time on older machines like this. We can see it's a 64 column display, which is also another kind of luxury feature back then. A lot of computers of this vintage, if you had video output at all, it was usually 32 column. So that's a pretty nice feature as well, and definitely handy when you're working with machine language programming and assembly language as well. But yeah, unfortunately for the moment, that's all this machine can do. You can type all you want, you can hit reset again, but basically it doesn't do anything. As far as we can tell, the Eprom itself seems to be fine. I've actually had some help from a fellow by the name of Dave on VCFed, and he actually helped devise a way to basically trick the computer into kind of dumping the contents of the ROM on screen. And then he was working on a spreadsheet that allowed us to sort of decode and see how it worked. And as far as he could tell from the little bit that we got from it, it does appear to be valid code. But yeah, lacking a manual that tells you exactly what to expect, this is about as far as we can go. Now, I know a lot of the viewers on my channel kind of come to it to see these older computers. That's sort of our niche. So if you're somebody out there who's actually had experience with one of these machines, or even better, actually has one of these machines, or even might have a copy of the software somewhere, definitely drop me a line. I would love to talk to you. Love to find out more about this, and hopefully one day I can find somebody with what we need to get this up and running and actually usable again. Anyways, always thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you again next time.